Hey guys, it's Tixie here and welcome back to the channel. So recently, about a month ago, we revisited Call of Duty Vanguard to see how that game was holding up in 2025. And by doing this, I actually realized that I never ranked the Vanguard multiplayer maps whilst the game was in its prime, or at least the most recent Call of Duty title, like I've done with Modern Warfare 2019, Black Ops Cold War, and most recently Modern Warfare 3. So today we're going to be throwing it back to 2021, having a little bit of fun, and I'm going to be ranking all 27 of Vanguard's multiplayer maps from worst to best. Let's get into it. So starting us off at number 27, and the worst map in Vanguard in my opinion is Red Star. Now I feel like this is going to be a fairly mutual agreement, I would have thought, in the comment section below, but Red Star for me there were two problems with it. Firstly, the map was way too big, and secondly, it just did not have great visibility. Now, if my memory serves me correct, I believe Red Star was in the beta. Now, when you do a beta, I appreciate that you want to keep your cards as close to your chest as possible, right? You don't want to give the players too much and kind of ruin that excitement around release, but at the same time, you want to kind of not give them anything terrible, and Red Star was just an awful map from the very beginning. I appreciate that obviously they did do the combat pacing in Vanguard, so some of the maps were probably built a little bit bigger to take that into consideration, but even on Red Star, playing even at the blitz pacing, I feel like you could have 18v18 and this map was still way too big. So it's Red Star at 27. At 26 we've got Gondola. So Gondola was a map that I was added in a little bit later on in the life cycle, and I'll be honest, there's a few maps in this list where it was a little bit difficult for me to kind of have a full opinion on them, right? Because my Vanguard playtime is probably quite low compared to other Call of Duty titles, but I just really didn't like Gondola. I thought it had a really weird layout. I just felt like the map didn't flow very well. I feel like there were some really weird places people could be on the map, and just generally the few times that I did play this map, I never really got on with it, and Gondola in at 26. At 25 we've got Oasis. So I feel like Oasis probably falls into the same category as Red Star, where the map itself just felt a little bit too big for me. I also feel that Oasis was a map that I think at times could be quite one-dimensional. You know, a lot of the time you'd have snipers on either side of the map. It was quite open. It could be very difficult to kind of move from one side of the map to the other. And again, it was just a map that I never really got on with, and it's Oasis at 25. Next up at 24, we've got Subpens. So again, I feel like Subpens was just a really, really bad map. I feel like it had a few too many levels to it, right? There was quite a bit of elevation on this map. Sometimes you could be up high, sometimes down a little bit lower. It felt like a lot of the time as well you could get shot from various different angles. And yeah, I just didn't like this map, right? I just feel like, you know, when you've kind of got this thought that there could be players in all directions, it can be very kind of difficult to get settled on the map. And this was a map that I never enjoyed seeing come up in rotation, and it's Subpens at 24. At 23, we've got Paradise. So Paradise, again, I think falls into the category of the map being a little bit too big. I think one of the big problems I had as well with Paradise was that there was a time when I felt like this was the only map that came up in rotation for me. Like, I would search for a game and you'd get Paradise, and I believe, if I'm right, there was no map voting in Vanguard, or I'd get put into a game that was already started and it would be on Paradise, and there were just so many parts, I think, of this map that didn't really get used. And yeah, just Paradise, not a map that I enjoyed, and it comes in at 23. Coming in at 22, and this may be a little bit controversial, I'm not 100% sure, and that is Sphere. So this map was a much better size. I'll give it that. It was a much smaller map, but it was just a map that I never really got on with. I didn't really have any success on this map. Obviously, you had the kind of underground bit where you could go. Then there's a little bit more elevation if you went around the back up sort of onto the top of the cliff type thing. But yeah, I just never really got going on this map. I never really liked the flow of it. I feel like this is a map that probably ranks a bit higher for other people because, like I say, generally it was a much better size. You were a lot more kind of in the fight. There was a lot more going on. But yeah, for me, I didn't really like this map, and it's Sphere at 22. So coming in at 21, and this was probably the hardest map for me to rank because I'll be honest, I think it was one of the last maps to get added to the game. So my playtime on this map was very, very limited, but that is Fortress. As I say, I think there was a lot going on this map. There was a lot of different lanes and a lot of different sort of objects and things you could be hiding behind. Again, there was quite a lot of elevation, specifically in the middle of the map, where you kind of look down on kind of either side. And yeah, I just didn't really like this map, never really got to grips with it, and it's Fortress at 21. So coming in at number 20, and this could again be a little bit of a controversial one, it's Castle. So Castle, obviously a very iconic map from World at War. I think many people were excited to see this map come back. I think a lot of us would rank it quite highly back in World at War. Aesthetically, it looked beautiful right here in Vanguard. I think they did a really good job with the textures on this map. It just looked amazing. But in terms of how it played, I just didn't think it played that well. I really didn't get on with it on this game. I think at times it felt like it was a little bit too big, which kind of doesn't make sense, right? With the kind of faster paced movement of Vanguard compared to World at War back in the day, you think the faster paced movement would help you be in the action a little bit more. But I just didn't get on with this map. I think with the destructible environments being added to it as well, I think it ruined it a little bit. And for me, it was Castle at 20. Coming in at 19 is USS Texas. So I believe this was brought back from World War II. World War II, a Call of Duty title that, again, probably one of my more least played ones within the franchise. So I didn't really know much about this map. I think kind of on the surface, I'd compare it a little bit to Hijacked, right? I'm not saying that they're the same map, right? But they kind of have a similar feeling to them. Very direct, straight maps, kind of with that 3-lane design in a different kind of way. But yeah, I just never really got on with this map. You know, possibly with more playtime, it could have been ranked a little bit higher, but I had to put it somewhere, and it's USS Texas at 19. Coming in at 18, we've got Demyansk. So I feel like one of the biggest problems with this map was that it was too easy for people to hold down either side of the map, right? On one side, you had the house, where a lot of people would sit in, either in the windows or sit up top. And then on the other side of the map, you had that kind of garage type shed building that people could kind of perch on the top of. And the rest of the map in the middle was quite open. So if you had people holding down either side, it could be very difficult to move. As I say, once you ran out, it was very open. You could get picked off very easily. And I think it just kind of ruined the flow of this map. And Demyansk, for me, came in at 18. So coming in at number 17, we've got Beheaded. So I thought Beheaded was a very cool idea for a map. But it just didn't really work for me. The map itself felt a little bit more circular in a way. I feel like you kind of played a little better if you stayed on the outer part of the map, kind of in the buildings and ran in and out of those. Whereas kind of the middle of the map, there was a lot going on. You could get shot from all kinds of different angles. And again, for me, probably a map that I can own up and say I didn't have a huge amount of playtime on it. But yeah, when I did play it, it was okay, but it was nothing special for me. It looked cool, but it's Beheaded at 17. So coming in at number 16, we've got Decoy. Now, I don't know exactly where I'm going to stand with this map, you know, compared to other people, right? Because on the surface, I feel like Decoy seems like it should be a pretty decent map, right? It had a pretty good layout. It was a fairly decent size. But the biggest problem I had with this map was that it was probably the map that was most affected because of the new destructible environments. And what I mean by that is that the map that you played on at the start of the game was completely different to the map you play at the end of the game, right? There was so much of that map that could be destroyed. And once it was destroyed, it just left the map so open, felt like you had very little cover. And at that point, it just became a little bit unenjoyable, right? Because you just felt like you could constantly be seen, shot from all kinds of different angles. And I feel like if certain parts of the map hadn't been destructible, I think this map would have held up a lot better and would have been a lot higher for me. But because of that, it's Decoy at 16. So coming in at 15, we've got Desolation. So again, this is another map where I think I can openly say that I had very limited playtime on it, but I quite liked it. It kind of gave me Favela vibes. I don't know if I'm tripping with that kind of analogy. I'm not saying that the maps were completely the same, right? They looked completely different. Favela, a much more colourful map. Desolation, a bit more of a darker kind of map. But I did like this map. I felt like there were a lot of passageways. I felt like you could kind of get lost on this map. Personally, for me, I'm a lot more of an SMG player. I like to run, try and get kills, keep on the move, kind of get lost on the map, make it hard for people to find me. So I think that was pretty cool, and that's what kind of helped me to enjoy this map, and it's Desolation at 15. Coming in at 14 is Desert Siege. So Desert Siege had some pretty crazy spawns in some of the game modes. I think it might have been the patrol game mode. Sometimes at certain ends of the map, you could get some serious like spawn killing and spawn trapping going, which for many of you who know me, as a fan of the game mode Demolition, whenever you can do some spawn killing, it's always going to buff a map for me. Obviously, Desert Siege as well was playable within ranked play. for search and destroy, which I think kind of made me buff this map a little bit. But again, overall the map was probably a little bit too big. Kind of got a bit of a buff with the rank play experience in search, but nothing too crazy, and it's Desert Siege at 14. Coming in at 13, we've got Dome. So again, Dome was a map that I think many of us were incredibly excited to see return. Another iconic classic from World at War. Now, Dome, obviously a much smaller map, and I think that in World at War, it worked perfectly, right? I think the size and the movement in World at War kind of made everything feel pretty decent. Whereas here in Vanguard, I think like it just felt too much at times. It just felt like you're constantly on top of each other. I know that we're kind of looking at it today from a 6v6 experience, but when you play with those higher player counts with the combat pacing on this map, at times it just felt ridiculous. Like it felt like you just spawn in and die, and I think it just kind of hindered this map more than helped it. So that's why Dome maybe a little bit lower than you might expect at 13. Coming in at number 12 is Gavutu. So I actually didn't mind this map. Again, I'm not really too sure where this map ranks in the general community, but I'm sure many of you will let me know in the comments section. Gavutu, it was good for control, right? I quite liked control on this map. Felt like you could get some spawn killing going, both in rank play and in pubs. I think, again, the fact that this map was playable in rank play on control and hardpoint, I actually probably played maybe as much, if not more, ranked play in Vanguard than I did pubs. So I think like the maps that were in that kind of playlist, you know, I got probably more playtime on Gavutu than maybe I would have done in pubs. And I think the 4v4 experience is always a little bit better, obviously a few less players on the map. And yeah, Gavutu was a map that, yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I'm not saying it was one of the best maps in the game, that's why I said it at number 12. But overall, I didn't think it was too bad. And as we say, Gavutu at 12. So coming in at number 11 and just narrowly missing out on a top 10 spot is Daz House. Now, don't get me wrong, Daz House, a very small map, very chaotic, very crazy, very, very good when it came to going for high kill games or maybe trying to do certain camo challenges. But all I can remember of this map was how ridiculous the shotguns were back when the game first released, right? This map was absolutely insane, incredibly frustrating to play at times, and I think it kind of could have been a little bit higher for me, but I feel like it was kind of like certain things about this map kind of dragged it down, like the experience of how crazy shotguns were and how unenjoyable it was at times. But then again, being a smaller map, you expect it to be chaotic. It did help with working towards camos, and it's Daz House coming in at number 11. So now we break into the top 10, and kicking us off is Casablanca. So Casablanca, I actually didn't mind this map. I actually found a little bit of success on it. Obviously, kind of running through the streets was pretty cool. Kind of got a little bit of elevation. You could be quite low if you're running through the streets. You could also be kind of up top, on top of the kind of buildings. Again, Casablanca, probably a bit of maybe a nothing map to a lot of people. I don't know if many people will have even remember it. But Casablanca, for me, I actually really like this map. The times that I did play it, I feel like it came into the game early enough for me to have, you know, enough experience playing it. And for me, Casablanca deserved its spot at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we've got Shipment. Look, it is what it is, right? You know, I always say it with Shipment and Nuketown. They're very iconic to their specific studio and to their specific universe, right? We've seen so much of Shipment and Nuketown throughout the years, and I think we will continue to do so in the future. They're very good at what they are. At the end of the day, right, you know, with Shipment, you know it's going to be chaotic, you know it's going to be crazy, high kill games, and, you know, although I didn't fully go for camos on Vanguard, I always think these maps get a bit of a buff because with the way the camo grinds work now, they're always very helpful in helping you get those camos, do certain challenges. It makes the process a lot faster, but also the map itself, you kind of, I feel like people learn how to play Nuketown and Shipment over the years, and if you play them right, they can be really, really good for getting high kill games. So it's Shipment in at number 9. So coming in at number 8, we've got Hotel Royale. So this was another really cool idea for a map, and another map that I believe was in the beta. I'm pretty sure this was one of the first maps, if not the first map I ever played. There was obviously a few different levels to this, right? You can kind of be up on the roof, or you can kind of be down low fighting. But I think the good thing about this map was that the elevation didn't really affect the gunfights you were in, right? It wasn't like you could get shot from various different angles, like you were getting shot from up high. You know, you could sometimes look through the windows, but most of the time the glass was smashed and people would jump down. And yeah, I think this map was a decent size, felt like you could get quite a lot of gunfights, felt like you could kind of get lost a little bit and move around quite quickly and use the different levels to your advantage. So it was Hotel Royale coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7, we've got Berlin. I genuinely really enjoyed Berlin. I think, again, it was playable across all 3 game modes in ranked play, right? So that, again, was a good way of getting quite a few reps across this map, both in Respawn, but also in Search and Destroy. And I genuinely think Berlin was a decent map, right? I think that, you know, maybe if I only played it in pubs, would I have the same opinion? I'm not so sure. But I think it had a pretty decent, you know, layout. I think you could get quite a lot of gunfights. You could use a sub, an AR, a sniper, right? You know, there was a lot of variation you could do on this map. And yeah, Berlin for me in at number 7. So coming in at number 6 and narrowly missing out on a top 5 spot was Numa Numa. So on the surface, I feel like I shouldn't really like this map, right? It was kind of more like a circular map. There wasn't really, you couldn't really say it was 3-lane map. You kind of had, you either stuck to the outer part of the map or you kind of went in the middle. If you went in the middle, it was kind of suicidal, right? Because you'd get shot from various different angles. Obviously, you had that kind of one palm tree that you could kind of go right up, which was a little bit stupid at times, but people got used to that spot and it was very easy to shoot people down from there. But this was the only map that I dropped a V2 rocket on. My one and only V2 rocket in Vanguard came on this map, so I feel like maybe I give the map a little bit of a buff because of that. But genuinely speaking, I feel like I kind of learned how to play this map. Always found it quite enjoyable, and it's Numa Numa in at 6. So next up, we break into the top 5, and kicking us off is Mayhem. So it's in the name, right? This map was absolutely mayhem, really did suit SMGs. I feel like it was a really, really cool idea for a map, right? Looked really cool, was kind of cool to fight between the buildings and feel like you're as big as they are, which was pretty insane. And again, I think it was like, you know, very similar to sort of Shipment. When you get a small map, something new, it's kind of cool to have another map to go for camos on, but also go for high kills. And I feel like what probably helped this map was that it was just something new, right? It's always nice to play something a little bit different. And for me, it kind of had all of the traits a small map would have, right? Chaotic, high kills, lots of engagements, but it was new, it was enjoyable, and it's Mayhem at 5. Coming in at number 4, we've got Radar. So obviously Radar was a remake of MW3's Dome. Not to get confused with the Dome we were speaking about earlier on in the video. Basically, I'm not saying, I don't think this map was everybody's favorite, right? But I really enjoyed it. It was slightly different to MW3's Dome, played a little bit different, but overall had a pretty much the exact same layout, just looked a little bit different. I feel like, again, when you get a map that you're used to playing, right, you kind of know how it works, you know how to play the map. And I just found a lot of success on this map. And I always feel like when you have a map that you kind of load in on and you feel confident on, you're always going to rank it a lot higher. And for me, it was Radar at 4. So coming in at number 3, we've got Bocage. So I absolutely love Bocage, right? You know, get me back on the cage with an MP40 and rank play. I absolutely loved it. But this map was good in ranked play, but it was also good in pubs, right? It was small, it was fast paced, but it was kind of big enough to feel like you could make decisions on the map. You could kind of get lost, you could go on streets, you could outplay your opponents, right? Unlike kind of maps like Mayhem and Shipment, where sometimes it's a little bit too small and it's easy to kind of call out. This was kind of the best of both worlds, right? And you know, like I said, it was a very fast paced map. I really enjoyed playing it. Had some crazy hardpoint games on here on ranked play. I think once pulled out the sniper on this map, did pretty well. Got a ball turret gunner, was just absolutely destroying the enemy team. Like, you know, Bocage, you're always good for high kills on this map. It was always a lot of fun to play, and it's Bocage in at number 3. So coming in at number 2 and missing out on the number 1 spot is Eagle's Nest. So Eagle's Nest, again, if I'm right, was in the beta, and I think quite instantly you knew that map was going to be pretty decent, right? It had the general 3-lane map design, you know, that always helps. It flowed well, it was a decent sized, it was fast paced, but not too fast paced. You had a little bit of the destructible environments going on around the kind of mid part of the map, but overall the map didn't really change too much with it throughout the games. And, you know, it was just always a fun map to play on, right? You know, you could always get high kills, a lot of engagements, you didn't have to run miles across the map to find people, there wasn't really any unused areas. And I'm pretty sure I had like a crazy free-for-all game on this map where I dropped like 50 eliminations, which I know sounds stupid because the score limit is 30, but for some reason ball turret gunner kills didn't count in free-for-all towards your actual kills. So I ended up getting like 50 eliminations and a 30 kill free-for-all on this map, which was absolutely insane. But yeah, Eagle's Nest, an amazing map, but it just comes in at number 2. And at number 1, the best map in Vanguard, in my opinion, and I have to admit this was a very easy decision, is Tuscan. Tuscan is a perfect Call of Duty map, I would say. It's got to be, you know, I don't want to say, you know, like a top 10 or a top 15 map of all time, but it would definitely be up there as one of the better maps, I think, in Call of Duty history. It was playable across all 3 game modes for competitive, and I think that's always quite telling, right, to how good a map's design is when it can be playable across all game modes, specifically in competitive, and when it plays well, right. It's always credit to the map layout. It had that general 3-lane map design, you know, a little bit of elevation if you got up in the kind of tower and looked out across mid-map, but generally speaking, this was just such a fun map. You know, different routes you could take. You could go on flanks, use a sub, use an AR, you know, anything kind of goes on this map. You know, it was such an enjoyable map, made for some really competitive rank play games. It was also good fun in pubs, and you know, for me, it was very easy, right? Tuscan, in my opinion, the best map in Call of Duty Vanguard. Okay guys, that's going to bring us to the end of today's list. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please do hit the like button down below. And as always, whenever we do these ranking videos, please do get involved down in the comment section. Let me know where you agree, you disagree, which of these takes was faded, what would you have done differently. I'd love to hear and debate it out down in the comment section. If you're brand new around here and want to find your way back for more, please do consider subscribing to the channel. And as always guys, I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.